We can feel it in the air. Freedom's coming, it is near. We won't give up for the rights. Standing strong for Palestine. Aqsa, we are coming home. We will stand next to the dome. Raise our hands up to the sky. Palestine will be free tonight. Hey, hey, hey.
At least 56,348 children in Gaza are orphans. About 90% of Gaza has been totally destroyed by Israeli savages. Genocidal Israel has dropped over 200,000 tons of explosives on Gaza. For your perspective, that's a total energy roughly equal to 10 Hiroshima-sized bombs. The so-called safe zone of Al-Mawasi has been bombed at least 136 times by Israeli barbarians. Among the more than 67,000 human beings that Israeli demons have murdered, more than 1,000 are under 1 year old. Israeli psychopaths have killed more than 1,600 medical personnel. Israeli savages have murdered more than 250 journalists and more than 140 civil defense rescue workers. 38 hospitals have been destroyed and are completely out of commission. 197 ambulances and 61 civil defense vehicles have been targeted by Israeli savages. More than 835 mosques have been completely destroyed, with 180 others damaged severely by Israelis. 3 churches have been targeted repeatedly by the Israeli war on Christian sites. 40 cemeteries have been destroyed by Israeli demons and hundreds of bodies have been taken. The total value of initial direct damages is estimated at $70 billion. After 2 years of an intended and planned genocide in Gaza, Western leaders still expect the victims of this despicable crime to negotiate with the barbaric perpetrators. The very same leaders that armed the genocide, the very same leaders that funded the genocide, the very same leaders that provided political cover for the genocide. A noble people, a courageous people, a people abandoned by governments in the Muslim world and in the West, have been withstanding this apocalyptic carnage for 2 years. They have been resisting in every way possible. Their mere existence is resistance. They have defied all human odds and calculations possible. They are courageous resistance fighters for whom no apology is made and who have no tanks, fighter jets, or high-tech weaponry, have inflicted the most severe damage to one of the world's strongest militaries and terror regimes. The media war, once a pillar of the demonic Israeli project, is on its knees. Human beings of conscience all around the world, from all races, nationalities, religions, and ethnicities, have stood up to the Israeli barbarity. Protests around the world have forced some governments to revise foreign policy with Israel. Protests around the world have forced some companies to divest from the despicable terrorist entity. Protests around the world have severely restricted travel for anyone carrying that appalling Israeli passport. People have taken to the oceans with almost 500 amazing people sailing on the largest flotilla in history in order to break the siege on Gaza. To commemorate the experience of the Palestinians of Gaza over the last 2 years, and to reflect, revisit, and strengthen our support and resistance to this medieval and demonic European-American manufactured Israeli occupation of 77 years, I am joined by a super panel of guests this evening. Activists, artists, writers, content creators, journalists, and scholars from various countries will be sharing insights with you and I over the next 2 hours or so. I'm Khalid Wouda, and this is Gaza Rising, 2 years of genocide, a live stream by Social Intifada. Assalamu alaikum, good evening, wherever you're watching us from, and welcome to our live stream. It's been an absolute pleasure putting the panel together who've all responded almost immediately in order to be able to contribute to the discussion this evening. And we've got quite a lineup. And I'm going to jump straight into our first guest, who is waiting patiently. Lina Abu Jarade is a Palestinian artist who has spent the last 15 years utilizing art mediums in order to tell the story of Palestine and the Middle East, including creating award-winning poetry and art videos, controversial comics, and large murals. She has shown her work in over 12 countries and is the winner of awards such as the Ghassan Kanafani Resistance Art Scholarship and the Plural Plus Film Festival Award. I'm very pleased to welcome Lina on board. Lina, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam, Khalid. Thank you for having me.
Jazakallah khair for your time. If I could jump into just the first question. You've relocated. You've got Palestinian roots, Palestinian heritage, but you've grown up in the US and you've relocated back to the Middle East. Do you mind sharing with the audience what made you make that move?
So I've relocated to Jordan, where I was born. Quite a long time ago. So I was a teenager when we moved back to Jordan, but I was raised in the U.S. And so my first language was English. And I'm originally from Jaffa, Palestine. Jaffa, if you all know, is where Yemen continuously tries to strike, Israel and the Israeli forces. Jaffa is now considered to be part of, the Israel as we know it today, but that's where my grandfather and my ancestors are from. And it's the name that I chose to give to my daughter. And it's actually a Kanani word that means beauty. And it just shows how deeply rooted we are, that Palestinians all around the world are still naming their children with these names. And we still have such a deep connection to our homeland. Even though I've never seen Palestine, I've utilized, half of my life to really share and humanize Palestinians and share the beauty and culture of my homeland.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think that speaks to the connection that Palestinians have. Because when you speak to Palestinians in the diaspora, wherever they may be, and it's something no other nation can fathom. Why is it that generations who've not seen the land of Palestine, who've never been there, but 2 or 3 generations down the line, have such a strong connection to the land? And I think for our viewers, there's some strong parenting tips that our viewers can pick up on from the, inshallah. Lina, you're involved a lot in art. How do you put across resistance through art? How effective is that? And how is that brought across, and how is that received through the various mediums that you work in?
I myself have really grappled with this question many times. Is art a form of resistance? Is it enough? Does it actually create any difference? And I'm here to say that it really does make a difference. The shift in awareness that we've seen in the past 2 years could not have been, possible without the tireless work of poets, artists, Palestinian activists who have continuously kept that spark alive. So I've been doing artwork when Palestine wasn't making the headlines. And it was important to me to make this work, even though not many people cared, not many people were sharing, it wasn't a trend, but because I believed if I could change the awareness of one person across the world about Palestine, about the Palestinians, if I'm able to humanize my people and change just one awareness, to me, that was enough of a difference. And in reality, this is what happened. It's like a snowball effect. So many activists through the years have been doing this work to keep that spark alive, not only in the world, but also among Palestinians themselves. So my parents' generation wasn't as active as the current generation and the next generation is going to be. They were much more afraid, much more pacified, much more, leaning towards more of like peace, or more of like, this is something in the past, let's live in the present. But no, my generation is really invested in liberating our homeland. And so this is really the power of art. The the literature of Ghassan Kanafani is really what awoke me to the Palestinian cause. The paintings of Tamam al-Akhal, who was expelled personally from Jaffa, and she depicted those paintings so realistically that I felt that I was living through that trauma that my grandpa lived. And so there's no understating the role of art as resistance. And for anyone who's Muslim, the Prophet, peace be upon him, really highlighted this fact with Hassan bin Thabit. He told him, "Uhjuhum," and "Uhjuhum" means, attack them with your poetry. And so this is really something that has been as part of our religious and historical legacy, and it's something that's now more important than ever, considering the amount of desensitizing photos that we are seeing, mass consuming on a daily basis. So what an artist does is really, it stops that mindless scrolling, and it really forces you to critically think and to place yourself into those pictures, into those moments, and really give it more of a thought than just scrolling and just becoming desensitized to these graphic images.
And you have a poem which you'll share with our audience in a little bit. But I just want to pick up on something you mentioned there, because you spoke about Hassan bin Thabit radiallahu anh. Often as Muslims, we find a disconnect between art and between our deen, between our faith. How do we marry the two? How do we marry the two? How do you manage to navigate this space? And what advice would you have for young Muslims who are aspiring artists, or who are poets, who are authors, who are writers, in terms of managing your faith and being able to express yourself fully?
That's an excellent question. And I think we need more conversations like this in religious spaces. For me, it all boils down to the idea of al-Muslim al-Qawi khayrun min al-Muslim al-Da'if, a hadith, a narration of the Prophet, of that a strong Muslim is better than a weak Muslim. And what I take it to mean is that each person was really born, like God created us with unique skills and unique talents. And it really is our duty and our responsibility to the Muslim Ummah to have that awareness about ourselves, to know what our strengths are, to know what God really created us in this world, in this time for, and to really utilize that for the betterment of our ummah. And so you need to make yourself stronger in whatever way you can, whether that's career-wise, whether that's physically, whether that's mentally. It really is our job to become stronger, because we've seen that, this international order doesn't protect people who look like me, who are brown, who are Muslim, who wear the hijab. That's not what this order was built for. So we as Muslims, we've really been exposed of how weak our ummah is and how weak our countries are. And so it's more important than ever to be strong and to really discover these talents. And you owe it to yourself to really be true to yourself and to your talents, rather than sometimes we're so pressured to go along with what society says, or what society says is the norm, or to become an engineer, or to become a doctor. But we have enough doctors and engineers. We need thinkers, we need innovators, we need artists, we need people to create movies on a large scale, like Mustafa Aqad, who created The Message. And he was assassinated for his work in really, creating really big and important works. And so we need these people. And so you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your ummah. Think about it in that way. How can I benefit my ummah with my skills and with my strengths and with my talent?
My last question to you on art would be, how effective, or what would be the level of effectiveness that you would place behind art compared to other forms? So through poetry, what can poetry do to somebody's soul, to somebody's psyche? And you're seeing poetry in different forms today, maybe with rap, or maybe with the different types of expression that poetry manifests itself, and with writings as well. What can that do to galvanize a person or people?
Yeah, with poetry specifically, I remember hearing a poem by Rafif Ziadeh called "We Teach Life, Sir." And it just shocked me to my core. And it allowed me to celebrate my Palestinianness. And it was something I had always been ashamed of. When I was in the US and they would ask me, "Where are you from?" I would always try to avoid this question, because I was almost ashamed of my background, in a sense. And so I think poetry art in general. There's a history of poets and artists that utilized art in order to mobilize grassroots movements in before 1948. And posters, you can see them in the Palestinian Poster Archive project, and they were really utilized to mobilize young men into striking, or Arab activists into striking, into meeting, into having a collective identity and awareness. And so even some of the ahazij, or some of the traditional Palestinian poetry that has reached us until today, is part of the culture that continuously keeps Palestinian identity alive. So Israel doesn't only attack us, or they don't only want to annihilate us physically, they want to annihilate Palestinian culture in its totality, because that means that Palestinians existed, and Palestinians have a right of return, and Palestinians have a claim in this homeland. And so they are continuously trying to steal our culture, our icons. And so it's so important for us to continue to produce and to celebrate the previous artists, previous poetry that is a part of our culture.
I think that's amazing inspiration for all our viewers and our listeners who have skills, and you are needed wherever you are in the ummah. You are needed for the cause. So please do take those skills seriously, and try and get in touch with Lina through her socials for advice. And I'm sure she would be available to assist and guide you along the way. We really appreciate that. Lina, before you go, we're really looking forward to your poem. So the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your wonderful questions about art. I think it's not something that many people speak about. So yes, we need artists. I don't want to speak of October 7th. Like CNN or the New York Times, this is for October 6th, the day that carried all the yesterdays, that quietly buried children beneath the beds you slept soundly in. Since when did the world commemorate dates anyway? No recollection of 48, of forlorn olive trees that wept goodbye to 6 million souls, to exile. Since when did the world learn to count? 1,100 Israelis. But what of 730 days of genocide? 18 years besieged, 58 occupied, 77 of Zionist pride, 103 of British lies. Can the world count high enough? To count the seas of tears that fall, the breath stolen from the children as they sleep, the grains of soil that cover Semite faces like mine, the smiles erased in a blessed homeland, the keys still hanging on walls that no longer stand. Today, I celebrate a people who survived infinite October 6th before they made your timid headlines. So join me in celebrating Gaza, wounded yet head held high above our definition of humanity. In the eyes of the free, Gaza, you are a sky, the closest road to God. Praise to the youth who marched into clouds wearing sandals, whispering apologies to their mothers, carrying the weight of their sleeping Muslim brothers. We are awake now. We can count. We can see the light being born in the darkest of darkness, beneath 150,000 tons of missiles, of dreams, of ribcage bones, cold stoves, unanswered phones. This is your exhale, the falling of Western idols, the chants of liberation echoing from the depth of every wound. From your soil, a radiant tomorrow will rise. Praise to the free. Praise to Palestine.
Lina, that's absolutely beautiful. And well, I'm sure we'll segment this and we'll have this available on social media for the benefit of the others. Jazakallah khair. We would ask viewers to get in touch with Lina. There's a lot of inspiration you can take from Lina, from her journey, from her roots as a Palestinian, and to be able to express yourself in whichever art form you feel your strength lies. This is something really, really important. Just the one thing came to mind while you were reciting the poem, the incident around the Battle of Uhud, when the Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ had suffered that military defeat on the field, and they were being insulted at by the Quraysh. And the Prophet ﷺ asked from among his companions. Who's going to respond to that? So words are important. Words are important at the right time because they can galvanize you, they can uplift your spirits, and they can do a lot for the human soul. And this is something we must never, ever, ever discount. Lina, Jazakallah khair for your time and for sharing that with us. And we hope to speak to you again in the near future. And inshallah, if we do not meet soon enough, we meet in a free Masjid al-Aqsa, sooner rather than later.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. Viewers, you can connect with Lina through the socials. They'll pop up in the description below. Please do get in touch with her. It's an opportunity to expand your artistic horizons and to be able to express yourself. We are moving on to our next guest, Dr. Anas Al-Tikriti, who is quite a renowned expert politically and internationally, who really, really wanted to be on the live, but due to other commitments couldn't be on the live, took the time out with me yesterday to do a pre-recording for the benefit of yourselves and for the benefit of all our viewers. I'm just going to navigate my videos here in order to bring that up and to share that with you for the next few minutes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair for joining us at this live stream. We are extremely honored. We're extremely pleased to have with us a very distinguished guest. He's managed to free up some of his time for the benefit of our viewers and listeners. I'm absolutely pleased to announce and welcome Dr. Anas Al-Tikriti to the live stream. Dr. Anas is the CEO and the founder of the Cordoba Foundation, former president of the Muslim Association of Britain. Dr. Anas has quite a long, distinguished CV, which if I'm going to read, could probably take up the entire live stream. But needless to say, Dr. Anas has been a consultant, he's an advisor, a negotiator, a mediator, and a trainer. And he's been working in all of these roles for more than the better part of 25 years. Has a unique insight into the political landscape within the Muslim world, within Europe, within the West. And he's been influential in delivering seminars, talks to influential audiences, to political leadership as well. Dr. Anas, we are extremely pleased and welcome to the live stream.
Khalid, it's a pleasure, and my gratitude to yourself as well as to Social Intifada and everyone who's joining this gathering of prominent activists and figures from around the world. To mark the second year of a genocide. And if I may suggest something that everyone knows, but we need to be reminded of, and that is that the past 2 years, we've truly been witnessing an advent that one could have only imagined reading about in history books or seeing documentaries on some channels, but to actually stand witness and to see an actual genocide unfold before our very eyes, where people are slaughtered and where the infrastructure that makes a place habitable is absolutely annihilated, and to continue to count the bodies found or those taken to mortuaries or those buried or those lost under the rubble every single day is something which is absolutely unique. And it's probably coupled with the way in which the world has reacted. I think that this has truly been something that is something to be told to generations to come. But let me come at this from the very end and where we are today. Today, we're talking about a possible ceasefire, a possible agreement. We're talking about a plan of multiple points that are on the table. And I've made several comments and spoken to several media over the past few days and outlined my own reservations, but also my optimism this time round. And my reservations basically focus on the fact that we don't seem to have one plan that everyone is looking at. We seem to have a multitude of plans, because there's the plan that Trump relayed to Arab and Muslim leaders, and as a result of which many of them went out and congratulated and welcomed and expressed enthusiasm in regards with. But then we had the press conference where Trump and Netanyahu stood and spoke, and there were many of the elements of the first plan which weren't included in what Trump and Netanyahu relayed to the world. And then we have a third version of the plan, and that is what Netanyahu relayed to the Israeli people. So when asked about the plan, I usually start by saying, well, which plan are we talking about? However, I think that from the political perspective and from the purely negotiation aspect, Hamas seems to have responded in a brilliant manner. And it seems to have, this time round, played Israel at its own game and came out on top. And that's something that not many people can actually say. The fact that Hamas realized that the master of ceremonies, in this particular case, Trump, was the kind of narcissistic, egoistic, manic personality that the world knows, and rather than challenge that, played to it and gave him essentially what he wanted. Remember, he was talking about the absurd outcome of ending a 3,000-year war, conflict. So they didn't go and challenge it, which would have been quite obvious and simple and easy to do, because it's a ridiculous claim. They actually played that card. And therefore, they found him, when they responded to the agreement plan, they found him someone who welcomed this and immediately went out on his platform and issued a directive that Hamas has accepted, and now Israel must stop bombing Gaza. And essentially all that the Palestinians want are a cessation of hostilities and the stopping of killing, the allowance of aid into an area that has been starved systematically now for many, many months, then laying the foreground for the reconstruction of Gaza and whatever happens in terms of how Gaza is administered. So getting those points whilst at the same time neglecting to acknowledge the other points which the Israelis wanted, i.e., the Gaza Strip being governed by Tony Blair, no less, the grand Satan of modern times, or the disarming of Hamas or the such. They neglected this. The way they responded was that they focused on what they wanted from this, and Trump accepted. And the Israelis were livid. They were angry by the fact that for the very first time, an American president gets a proposal and doesn't relay it to Tel Aviv first and foremost to get their notes back before responding. This time they were dealing with Trump, and need to take Trump good and bad. I mean, that's the fact that this time round Hamas apparently realized. Now, being here does not mean that everything has ended. Let's not forget that if, in the best case scenario, hostilities stop today, Gaza will still be under siege and Palestine will still be under occupation. And therefore, going back to where we were on the 6th of October 2023 is not good enough. And the Palestinians realize this, and the entire world has come to realize this. And this is where I want to concentrate for the next remaining few minutes that I have. Gaza and what has happened, whilst being absolutely unique, also part of that uniqueness is how the entire world responded to Gaza. Failing to mention or ignoring the fact that, unfortunately, most Arab and Muslim nations were almost silent, let's say, I would say 90% silent, due to the fact that they are ruled by oppressive regimes which had signed up to normalizing with Israel. But the fact of the matter is that the world was shaken by what happened to Gaza into consciousness. Gaza had, whilst we are calling for the freeing of Gaza and Palestine, Gaza had managed miraculously to free the entire world, to free the world and awake it from the slumber of being taken in by the Zionist narrative for so long. Awaken to realize that their own countries, their own states in Europe, in North America, in Asia, in Africa, were complicit for some reason or another in propping up this tiny state which had created so much havoc around the world in the last 80 years, had waken up into realizing that because of Israel, these so-called countries, my own, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Germany, France, were willing to steal and forsake and confiscate our liberties for the sake of Israel. And everyone started asking why. For the sake of Israel, America was siphoning tens of billions of dollars, much needed for the 2 million homeless in America every single day, for a non-functioning healthcare system that leaves out millions and millions of Americans and forsakes their future, plows tens of billions into the Israeli economy. And all of a sudden, Americans are asking, why? All of a sudden, the Zionist lobby, headed by AIPAC, was questioned. Who are you? You're not American. If you call for Israel to come first, then you're not American. And all of a sudden, people were enraged that they were part and parcel of the war crime that had been committed and continues to be committed. Now, let's try to wrap this up and understand what's happened. The world now has been split into two camps. There can be no third. One is the Zionist camp, and that is a minute camp in today's estimations. And you have the vast majority of people around the world who stand on the other shore and stand accusing the Zionists of committing one of the most horrific crimes in modern times. This is what we have, and that is a very good place to be in when we are pursuing our dream of freeing Palestine. In fact, liberating ourselves from the clutches of hegemony and of oppression under the guise of laws and whatnot, and human rights and the such, which have been peddled falsely, unfortunately. We are in a good place. And all of this is because of Gaza and the price that Gazans have paid with the lives of their most dear and loved ones. But this is a trail that we have to track. And this is a pursuit that we will never, ever relent in trying to achieve. So we continue. Free Palestine, free Gaza, Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. If you're just joining us now, this is Gaza Rising, a live stream commemorating the 2 years of genocide in occupied Palestine at the hands of the Zionist regime, the terrorist Israeli regime, and all its supporters around the world. We're going to go to a short intro before I introduce our next guest.
We can feel it in the air. Freedom's coming, it is near. We won't give up for the rights. Standing strong for Palestine. Until we are coming home, we will stand next to the dome. Raise our hands up to the sky. Palestine will be free tonight.
Welcome back. The beautiful smiles on the faces of our children in occupied Palestine, unbreakable spirit, and somebody who comes from Palestine, who has deep roots in Palestine. I'm very, very, very pleased to welcome our dear sister Shireen from the US. Assalamu alaikum, sister. How are you?
Assalam. Thank you for having me. How are you?
It's good to speak to you again and good to see you again. Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for your time. For the viewers who are not familiar, I would ask where you've been over the last 2 years, but I would do you the honor of letting you know that our sister Shireen Palestine is an Palestinian Jordanian American journalist, a human rights activist. She's a speaker and a humanitarian with a background in healthcare administration. She lives in the US, in California. You'll find our sister on socials doing excellent work with content creation and reporting on what's been taking place. So she's been a part of the war against the Zionist media machine and a very successful team globally that we have of Muslim content creators and reporters. Sister Shireen, first question to you. It's been difficult, I'm sure. Difficult would be underestimating it for any Palestinian living in the diaspora to watch what's been going on over the last 2 years. What's it been like for yourself? What's it been like for your family to be able to witness this from the outside and not be able to do anything physically to want to change everything?
Wow. Honestly, there's a bit of a clash between your normal life, given that you have responsibilities and you have to, go to work and put dinner on the table, and then you have to check back in and try to be active and do the best that you can and donate and stay on top of things and figure out how we're going to maneuver ourselves in a better way as a society, as Muslims, as Arabs, as a unit. It's been really tricky. There's definitely a sense of cognitive dissonance throughout the day. You just feel like you dissociate, you kind of lose yourself. Because pouring a cup of coffee seems like the most insane thing in the world, where it shouldn't feel that way. Eating a meal or feeding my child doesn't feel right. Nothing that sits right anymore, because I know there's a woman who is exactly my age with the amount of children that I have and had a beautiful home, and now that was taken away, and she's sitting on the other side of the world by a twist of fate, by chance, and she's suffering, she's hungry, she's wondering how can she find medication, how can she find her next meal, how can she find a tent or a plot of land. And I just think how unfair that is, given that I am Palestinian, I am from Jerusalem. My mom did walk in the Nakba and she was only 3 years old, and having all of that, now I'm on the other side watching. It feels disgusting, to be honest. And normal life doesn't sparkle the way that it sometimes. When I get lost and I remind myself, when I get lost in the happiness, or there's a brief excitement, it's hard to digest that, and it shouldn't be. This should be normal, to feel normal, but it's not normal to feel normal anymore. And I hate to say that is the most healthiest response to seeing what's happening to our brothers and sisters in Gaza and in the West Bank.
You touched on an important point, and it makes me reflect on, we had Yumna Al-Sayed in South Africa a short couple of weeks ago, and she repeated what she mentioned when she was here last year. When she left Gaza, there was a feeling of guilt inside of her. Why am I able to get out of Gaza and others are not? So whatever blessings she had, just your ordinary things like you mentioning, pouring a cup of coffee, looking after your kids, seeing that they're okay, were bringing about feelings of guilt. And a lot of Palestinians who are not in Gaza or in the West Bank right now are going through those. So can I extend on that with you? And how do you pass that message on to everybody else who's supporting the cause of Palestine and who wants to see the liberation of Palestine from this demonic Zionist rule and occupation? How do people manage this feeling of guilt inside of them? Because others who are not Palestinian are also going through this. They're also having a similar feeling.
Managing your expectations, it's a daily struggle that just comes with being an adult. I don't think that there is any way to quiet the anger and the rage, but I do believe that the rage and the disgust and the discomfort is what's going to liberate Palestine. I do feel that society is way too comfortable, and a sign that we are not going to liberate Palestine is our comfort. And it's not until we step into the anger and step into the disgust and step into the cringe and step into all of these very uncomfortable feelings and act on it in a way that is organized, will we see the liberation. We cannot change society without discomfort. So this discomfort is the tool in and of itself. So for every parent or every college student or anyone who is feeling utterly useless or hopeless, that feeling is a feeling that you do have a heart and a soul, and the thing to do next is to act on it. So there are a lot of people and a lot of resources in the last 2 years that have developed for instance, anyone who brings a petition forward to me, or if there is something to be done and organized in my community or on a state level, and I can bring that forward, there are a lot of people in my position exactly who are doing the same thing, who are turning themselves from content creators or just normal citizens into full-time activists and no, go back. Full-time activists and making, the little one is here. I see you. Okay.
That's an additional guest, by all means.
No, yeah. This is an activist. She's 3 years old. And she definitely says a lot of things in the cashier line that sometimes even I don't have the courage to say. I learned the ones that they teach me a lesson. Okay. I'm so sorry, you guys. This is the reality. Outside, Mama, so we can go play games later. Okay. Can you hear her?
That's okay. That's actually, and that was going to be my next question to you, actually. How do you manage? We've got mums watching here. We've got mums of all ages with kids of all ages. How do they manage? You said there's a dissonance, there's a cognitive dissonance between what you're seeing in Palestine and your normal lives. How do mums manage? How do our sisters manage?
Unfortunately, there's a phenomenon in psychology, I forgot what it is called, but it's close to the small group effect, where we believe that there is somebody who is more qualified to speak and to act on the Palestinian cause than us. So it is the belief that, oh, well, I'm just a mom, I'm just a doctor, I'm just a teacher, I'm just an imam, I'm just I just work at, a fast food restaurant. Somebody out there is more qualified to speak on. And that is the exact thing that I want to turn people away from, and to activate your voice. And really, it's our numbers that have shaken society in and of itself. Actually, there was a poll by Quinnipiac University done back in this August that found that half of US voters say what is happening in Israel is in fact a genocide, which is an insane number. That is 1 in 2. That is 200 million. That would represent 200 million. And 6 out of 10 believe and oppose Washington sending more aid to Israel. This is crazy because the poll has been an ongoing poll for the last 24 years. So this poll from Quinnipiac University started back in 2001. And what it has found this year is that the roles of sympathy towards Palestinians and Israelis has reversed. So sympathy for the Palestinians and Palestinian cause is at an all-time high at 37%, and sympathy for Israelis is at 36%. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it means that our voices, our place, our role in society is important, is in fact changing the tide. And yes, it is a slow moving train, but it is a train that we are all on board for. And if we don't step up, your politicians are not going to step up. If you don't care, no one else is coming to care. And if we don't save them, what's going to stop that kind of chaos and that kind of pain and that kind of hurt from coming home? And that's one of the things that I feel like in American society is bizarre, is we don't, because our government has kept us in a state of war, we are desensitized to it. But simply engaging, donating, amplifying. You guys, it is so incredibly important because mainstream media no longer acts the way that it does because of your voices. So you have the power to break the internet, given the censorship, given all of the things that the government is trying to do to manage our voices. And that is a confirmation that, in fact, what we are doing in our little numbers, in our little homes, with our phone, with our internet, with our flags, all of that is doing something to bring about the end of the regime. So don't give up. Don't stop posting. Don't stop showing up. Don't stop organizing. And if you look back in history, really the biggest revolutions have started at simple cafes over a cup of coffee. Why wouldn't that be the same now? Why would it have to be President Trump who ends the occupation? The occupation ends with us. It is by our own will. And it is only with our discomfort and our disgust that we will achieve that. So don't stop believing in your oneness, in yourself, and bring that into your family. And my little ones are here. One of the things that makes this an ongoing thing is I don't try to be exclusive. I bring my kids, I bring them into my world. This is our world at the end of the day. And that is the inspiration behind all of it. This is our world, and our kids are inheriting it. And if you believe that, then that should be enough inspiration for you to act and just do a little more. Just do a little more. Add a little bit more. So, for instance, instead of just watching and seeing all of these videos of these Gazans, oh, please help me, maybe, just maybe, donate once, maybe donate twice, maybe instead of just liking, share, maybe instead of just sharing, share it to your family, maybe instead of just doing that, maybe sign a petition, maybe create a petition, maybe organize, maybe go to your local mosque or your church or your whatever it is. And I will consistently say this, some of the hardest conversations and the hardest people to convince are your own family, behind closed doors, not even in City Hall. It is home. The oppression is here. And that's because we've been so desensitized to it. So we are changing society in a small way. And it starts at home and it starts with you. So yeah, don't stop. And I will do everything to bring my own resources and my own way. And that's why I do have a broadcast and I do take my platform very seriously. And I completely respect and I'm so enamored by my audience who follows me on Instagram and all of the other platforms. Your voice is muted.
I am on mute. There we go. I think that's an excellent message, viewers and listeners. Act and then do a little more. Shireen's given so much practical advice. So
there was a
yeah.
Okay, can I?
Go for it.
Back in August, there was a judge that ruled that burning the Israeli flag can now be considered a hate crime. And there are a lot of civil rights liberties experts, legal scholars that go against this judgment, because what has happened, which is very interesting because we're talking about skills, and one of the things that I've observed is something I have never seen at this pace and this skill, which is legal ambiguity. The lines are blurred between racial expression, political expression, and racial discrimination. We see this with the word anti-Semitic, for instance, having been legally changed in the United States to only mean Zionists, which is insane because that's a ideology of Jewish people, and no longer considers me, a Semitic person, a Semite. We see this on platforms. We see this in California. There's a bill being passed that would make software or platforms such as Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube responsible, liable for users posting. So if I say something, I would no longer be liable for that. Instagram would now be liable and they would be taken to court, which would mean that the censorship that we see now would not be close to the censorship that we are going to be seeing in the near future if this bill passes. So the truth is, there's a lot happening. And the reason why it's happening, and there's a pushback legally against burning the Israeli flag, using the word anti-Semitic, posting, just using your free speech, is because what you are doing is effective and it scares the Zionist entity. And if I could say one thing, the solution comes down to boycotting, because we are a capitalistic nation. Everything is a business transaction. We have buying power, even if it's just $1. And once we start to believe that and lean into our anger, we can not only boycott, which is becoming illegal to even ask if companies are associated with Israel, believe it or not, even to imply or ask if a company has relations to Israel. To not only boycott, but to also put our money towards companies and organizations that support our causes. And that is something that we're lacking in, and they are working overtime to make that legal. So we need to basically follow the kind of legislation that they're putting forward and do the opposite of what they're putting. So if they say it's illegal to boycott, we continue boycotting. If they say we're going to censor TikTok and it's going to be pro-Israeli, we're going to continue posting. So don't believe, and I've heard this so many times, Shireen, it's not enough to just post. It's not enough to just do this. We have to do more. And although I believe and I agree with the latter phrase, which is yes, we do have to do more, I disagree in that every little thing, every little post isn't doing anything. It's actually causing a lot of trouble for many rich people who don't want this to go down the way that it's going.
Shireen, on behalf of Social Intifada and the team and all of our viewers, we really want to thank you for taking the time out. Viewers, please connect with Shireen on her various socials. You'll find her on Instagram, you'll find her on YouTube and other socials as well. Please follow for excellent content, up-to-date content and insights within US society and with a view on Palestine. Shireen, Jazakallah khair. We hope to speak to you again soon, inshallah. We appreciate your time. Our next guest is waiting in the studio. I'm pleased to announce and to welcome our dear brother from South Africa. Bram Hannekom is a human rights activist and is a board member at the Africa for Palestine movement. Bram has spent several years of experience in the civil society and NGO sector. In addition to his role as an activist for Palestine, he's established himself as an activist for refugee rights, for farm workers, and for the youth. He also serves on the board of several NGOs. Bram, assalamu alaikum, good evening, welcome to the stream.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me and for arranging this extremely important event.
We really appreciate your time. Bram, I'm going to jump straight into it. You've been quite active on the Red Card Israel campaign, and we heard Dr. Mustafa Barghouti here in South Africa recently as well. He also emphasized on an experience that we went through in South Africa, the need for the cultural and sports boycott and isolation of Israel, like we did with the apartheid regime in South Africa. There have been talks in the pipelines for the last few years throughout the genocide, UEFA talking about it, FIFA talking about it. It's going back and forth. FIFA's having a meeting. UEFA were meant to have a meeting last week. Where are we heading with this? What's the situation in terms of the authorities? Because from recent reports, the European Football Association, some of those nations are starting to put pressure on UEFA. So it's a bottom-up activism process. It's going to be a long one, but give us your take on where you're at, because you're quite active in this with the various journalists and activists around the world.
No, thank you so much, Khalid. I think it's really quite disappointing and concerning. We had once a very radical government in the space of art, sports, and culture. And this dates back for over a decade, quite well over a decade, where we had Thulas Nxesi, when he was Minister of Sport, publicly writing a statement and openly indicating that he was boycotting, participating, or attending the Davos tennis match that was the Davis Cup tennis match that was hosted in South Africa, because Israel was participating. So we had a Minister of Sport coming out publicly and doing that. Recently, we had the tragic news of the passing of Nathi Mutetwa, who was ambassador of South Africa to France, but was also our Minister of Sport. And when he was Minister of Sport, he personally assisted and intervened in stopping the Springbok rugby team from hosting the Israeli team in a coaching clinic in Stellenbosch. We also saw him publicly come out and defund and disassociate and actually blatantly say that if Miss South Africa went to Israel and performed and participated in a pageant in Haifa, which of course we all know is stolen land from the Palestinian people, that the government wouldn't be at all supportive and that she'd be representing herself. So we had very progressive and strong ministers in that space who, although we hadn't gotten a full-on boycott resolved at cabinet and government level, we had ministers trying their very best to make sure that no legitimacy was given to the Israeli regime through sport and art activities. Unfortunately, now we have a minister who hasn't really shown any attempt to help, but we remain with a government that's very, very firm on matters like Palestine having taken Israel to the ICJ, as well as Western Sahara, having been very outspoken in the supporting of the human rights of the people of Western Sahara. While in spite of these government positions, we see Danny Jordan now apparently openly saying, in defiance of the AU and South Africa's diplomatic position, that SAFA will support the bid from Morocco to host the World Cup soccer. We also see SAFA, the South African Football Association, trailing very, very, very far behind other football federations in calling out Israel and calling for the red carding of Israel at FIFA. So we have a really big problem in South Africa when it comes to SAFA. And we are at a point where we are looking forward to see a leadership change, because we feel that the current leadership of SAFA is so heavily corrupted in their diplomatic actions and international engagements that we haven't had the success, in spite of having so much support from South Africans on the ground, and in spite of the government's posture and position when it relates to the genocide of Palestinians. Yeah, I think I've spoken long. Maybe I should hear the next question. Thanks.
So that's from the side of South Africa and from within Africa. Unfortunately, Israel doesn't play within CAF, within the Confederation of African Football. Israel, through nefarious means, ended up playing in the European competition in the mid-90s. We're seeing increased demonstrations at European games, at club matches, at the Champions League level as well, with for example, PSG during last season's campaign in the Champions League, PSG fans holding up banners about the genocide. We're seeing that when they go to Turkey. We're also seeing the true face of Israeli supporters with the Maccabi fans, their hooliganism on display in Athens last season. It was on display in Amsterdam as well. They're supposed to be playing Aston Villa in Birmingham within the next few weeks in a Europa League match. All of these are displaying increased hostility towards the Zionist regime and towards the hooligans that represent the Zionist regime. But we're still getting this issue within UEFA, and now Donald Trump, who knows nothing about football, has decided to weigh in and say Israel can't be banned from playing at the World Cup, not knowing that they've got to qualify for the World Cup first, which hopefully doesn't happen, thanks to Italy, and hopefully Italy do a job on them this week again. How are the federations working abroad, especially in Europe, in order to be able to finally get Israel out of international football? Because for Russia and Ukraine, it was 4 days. It was literally 4 days. Russia was kicked out of all football, and here Infantino is dilly-dallying for the last better part of 2 years.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's fascinating to observe that Palestine being the one country and from the river to the sea, and as part of Palestine, you've got this occupied, stolen land that calls itself Israel, in violation, as we know, of all international law to speak of. But the fact that Israel participate in the European League and Palestine participates in the Asian League, in of itself, to us, creates questions. Is it not a deliberate racialization? Is it not a deliberate attempt to de-Westernize and to shift Palestine from being involved in European sport and rather make it be perceived that Palestine isn't European while Israel is European? It's very odd for us that this same piece of land finds itself in Europe and in Asia. So, we also need to ask questions about how does it happen that Palestinians are excluded from one tournament and deemed Asian. It's quite odd for us, and I think it speaks to the racism and all the different elements with their agendas in sport and FIFA and of course in the federations globally. No explanation whatsoever can be given for why Israel is still participating in the soccer, still accepted to participate in global sport, given, like you said, what happened to Russia. We can only conclude that we don't have a democracy, we don't have a FIFA or federations that represent the people. I mean, the very fact that in South Africa, with such an overwhelming mandate for Palestinian support, we've got Danny Jordan unable to speak out and say red card apartheid Israel. In fact, here, like we had some soccer players, including ones who were supported by yourself, some soccer fans, including people that you supported as Social Intifada, attending the Malawi Bafana Bafana soccer match and being arrested, seemingly by an instruction of SAFA to say they're not allowed to be in the crowd with a Palestinian flag or a red card Israel shirt. It just goes to show the magnitude of what we're fighting here and makes the fight more necessary and more important. We need to relentlessly be disruptors of Israeli sport, Israeli arts and cultural activities. We need to hold Israel to the level that apartheid South Africa was held at. And if that means disrupting sporting events, not that that's what happened in South Africa, it was nothing like that. But I can speak personally about 15 years ago or so when I threw marbles onto the ice skating rink when Israel's ice skating team was playing South Africa at Grand West Casino. We felt the need to interfere and intervene, even if we knew that what we were doing was civil disobedience and could have consequence. We actually need to, as a world, say absolutely no. We're not going to allow any Israeli teams to participate in sport in our countries across the world. We need to continue working together and supporting global initiatives and celebrating those sporting fans around the world that have come with these massive banners and have shown their solidarity. And eventually, like with apartheid South Africa, eventually the tide will turn. But we are extremely concerned because the rapid ethnic cleansing and genocide that we're seeing necessitates absolutely no delays and necessitates an urgency for immediate intervention. And we don't see that coming. And we can only conclude it's because there are levers of power from the United States and some other places that clearly have more influence than people who are buying the soccer tickets or watching soccer on TV screens.
So that's the ugly side of the politics of football, of international football, which, like the politics that govern people's lives, is also quite ugly. People think that we have a free reign and we have leaders who have been elected to serve people, but they're not actually serving people. And it's exactly the same with governance in football. Bram, in your closing message for our viewers who are from all over the world, what would you advise? How can they support the initiatives to red card Israel and to make sure that Israel is uncomfortable wherever they go and eventually Israel does get removed from any and all international sports?
I think that we need to participate in disruptive efforts. I've seen it in Europe where people have chained themselves to soccer posts during soccer matches. I think that we have an obligation as people to do anything and everything we can to make sure that these Israeli teams are not welcome in any country around the world. I say this with caution because people need to make those decisions on their own. I'm not saying that from my side, I'm asking anyone to do it, but in my own view, given any opportunity to take action to intervene, we need to, as citizens of the world, to stop this genocide from happening. We really can't afford to hold our hands up and wait for these federations to eventually, maybe, if we're lucky, say and do what we're asking them to. We need to make it very clear as fans of various sports and as citizens that we don't tolerate our soccer fields and our rugby fields and so on being utilized by genocidal war criminals and supporters of the Israeli regime or representatives of an illegitimate state. So I think it's very important for us to make it clear that we're not going to open up the gates and allow for such illegal representation from an illegal state. So I think in closing, I think we need to do anything and everything we can. Those who are able to hold a flag, to show their protest, fantastic. Those who are able to take the federations and the hosts of these apartheid Israeli teams to court, they should do so. Those who can come in numbers and protest, do so. But those who want to refuse to open the gates for people to enter the soccer matches, I think we're at a level of desperation where we can't say that civil disobedience is intolerable with such an illegitimate state. And we're seeing it all over the world. And I think we need to stand in solidarity with those who boldly take action, peaceful action, but disruptive action.
Bram, excellent advice. And I think for our viewers and our listeners, wherever you're tuning in from around the world, whatever is within your capability and within your ability, wherever you are. And if you do encounter Israeli sport teams, Israeli sports individuals, look at which ways you can peacefully disrupt any of those events and prevent those events from taking place, and to ensure that you put pressure on your authorities, whether it's in football, even if it's the Eurovision, whatever cultural and sport activities there might be, where you've got Israeli participation, make sure you put enough pressure on them, and drop back in to reach out to Bram as well, reach out to Africa for Palestine for updates on campaigns and further information that you might need. Bram, on behalf of the team at Social Intifada, we really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your time on this 2-year commemoration of the Gaza genocide. We look forward to speaking to you again soon. Go well.
Thank you so much.
We can feel it in the air. Freedom's coming, it is near. We won't give up for the rights. Standing strong for Palestine. Until we are coming home, we will stand next to the dome. Raise our hands up to the sky. Palestine will be free tonight.
If you've just joined us, Assalamu alaikum, good evening, good morning, wherever you're watching us from. Welcome to the live stream, Gaza Rising, 2 years of genocide, the spirit of resistance. I'm Khalid Vauda and Social Intifada. Well, glad to host you this evening. My next guest, who is waiting patiently in the wings, is somebody who needs no introduction to regular viewers and to scholars and to aspiring students of Palestinian history. Dr. Khalid Al-Waisi is from Al-Khalil in Palestine, also known as Hebron. He is a lecturer of the pioneering field of Islamic Jerusalem studies. His main speciality is in the historical geography of Islamic Jerusalem. He is currently the Associate Professor of Islamic History at the Social Sciences University of Ankara and the Executive Director of the Islamic Jerusalem Academy. Dr. Khalid, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you back to Social Intifada's channel and to the program and to the discussion. We wish that we could have met under better circumstances, but we're commemorating 2 years of a brutal, brutal genocide. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair. It's always a pleasure speaking with you and to your audience.
We really appreciate you joining us. Dr. Khalid, there's some talk circulating online. There's talk within some Jewish circles, there's talk within some Muslim circles, some pointing to scholarly work and references about an 80-year cycle for the end of the Zionist project. Could you perhaps shed some light on that, both from an Islamic point of view and perhaps a Jewish point of view? Is there any truth to that, and what can people look into in terms of that?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. And I think it is important to give hope at a time when we are really losing hope. And we are 2 years on to this genocide and what is happening. in Gaza, and the complicity of world leaders and the silence of the Ummah. And unfortunately, most of humanity. This is a time when things are getting really difficult for our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Yet, just a few days ago, speaking to my aunts there, the spirit of resilience, Sumud, their iman in this being the end of this Zionist state, and they willing to pay the price to keep going and never giving up is something outstanding. It's a miracle in itself. 2 years on, these people are still resisting, and this beautiful spirit of resistance amongst normal people is continuing. There is something that we know within the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about sunnatullah, the laws that God has created for the world. And some people try to place all hope on a savior, but this is not how it works. Within Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Allah will not change a circumstance of a people until they change it themselves, or until they change what is within themselves. And we see this when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through a 3-year boycott in Mecca. People starving out of hunger, people are in a really difficult position. It did not stop by a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It stopped when the people of Mecca had had enough of this injustice and stood up with one voice against the injustice that was going on. And then when the people stood up and took a strategy to end what was happening and the starvation of the people in Mecca, and these actions were not taken by Muslims, these were taken by Hisham ibn Amr and others who were non-Muslims but had a spirit of humanity in their hearts, who proclaimed that they will not eat and drink until Bani Hashim have been fed 3 years after their starvation. Only then did revelation come to the Prophet ﷺ to state that the document that has been placed inside the Kaaba issuing this boycott has been ended. So it will not end until humanity takes a stance. And we see this across the whole world, across the streets in Spain, across the streets in France and England and the USA, across Turkey. Unfortunately, in the Muslim countries, we don't see this, with the exception of the Far East Asia and Yemen. But most of the Arab countries, you cannot even protest for Palestine until this changes. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this will end. Within the Quran, within the Muslim perspective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the second mischief of the children of Israel in Surah Al-Isra in verse 7. And it talks about a number of stages before we will enter Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and as it was entered the first time. It says that you will disgrace their faces, and this is number one, and they're making our job easy in this regard. Sheikh Ahmed Yassin years ago said that according to his calculation of this sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will take 40 years to change the first generation, another 40 years. So he calculated from 1947 till 1948, from 1947 till 1987, when the first Intifada took place. And he said it will be another 40 years before the liberation and the end of this Zionist project. And we are coming to that. Within Jewish tradition, they also believe, and this is being said by many of their rabbis, even to the face of Netanyahu, this curse of the 80 years is something that they know will be the end, and they have reached the peak of injustice. They have reached the peak of this arrogance, And Netanyahu said to them, I will make sure that this state, this Zionist state, will live for 100 years, for a century. He will not be able to do this. He is struggling to keep his seat where he is. He is extending the war in Gaza so he can cling on more to his seat. So he is in a really desperate position in one side. And what we see, the Zionists have reached the maximum that they could reach in terms of their arrogance, their aggression, attacking not just Gaza, but also Lebanon and Syria and Iran, and beyond that to Yemen, and lastly to Qatar, which is in a sense was mediating the talks between them and the resistance movement. And them striking there is something that has turned the table. You see the arrogance in the way that they have dealt with the flotilla coming into Gaza, kidnapping them in the high waters, and trying to humiliate the people there. You saw the arrogance of Ben Gvir shackling people in front of him, making them kneel for hours with their hands tied behind their back. And I was just listening just before I came on now to one of the Turkish women on this flotilla, and she said when he came, the footage that he shared was doctored, because when people started shouting back in his face when he called them terrorists, they shouted "Free Palestine," and she said one of the people spat right in his face, exactly in the middle of his face. And these people, the resilience of these people that he tried to humiliate, not just the people of Gaza, just the whole world was there on that flotilla, is something that has started the decline of this Zionist state. You have professors of future studies, this is before the flood of Al-Aqsa, talking about the end of the Zionist project, that it will not be able to survive. You have Zionist academics talking about what brought the Zionists in 1948 together no longer bonds them in this state that they are in at the moment. The whole world has seen the real face of this Zionist entity. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised, the number one before entering Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is to disgrace their faces, before bringing and crumbling down this injustice that has gone on for many, many decades. It will come to an end. This Zionist entity is foreign to this land. It is not from this land. As much as they try to claim, you had Netanyahu in a tunnel underneath Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. You had him opening another tunnel with Marco Rubio and the American ambassador, trying to claim a history that has nothing to do with them. The road that they are calling the Pilgrimage Road, there is no evidence whatsoever linking them to the Israelites or the Jews 2 centuries ago or two millennia ago. Actually, what you have is a Roman city called Ilia or Ilia Capitolina, and they're trying to claim that this has some history linked to us. Then you have Netanyahu talking about, beyond Netanyahu, you have Donald Trump talking about 3,000-year conflict. This is not a 3,000-year conflict. This is a Zionist, a Christian Zionist project, a Western colonial settler project that has been placed in this land, just like the Crusades lasted for 88 years in the land of Bayt al-Maqdis and came to an end. This Zionist settler colonial Western project will come to an end, but it all depends on me and you. It all depends on everyone listening. If you take action, you ask, when will it be? Will it be in a couple of years? Will it be in 3 years? Will it be in 10 years? Will it be in 30 years? The more you work towards exposing this Zionist entity, the closer we are to the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis, of Palestine, and of al-Masjid al-Aqsa.
Dr. Khalid, that was actually going to be my question to you, which, alhamdulillah, you've already answered. Jazakallah khair. Naturally, our people and supporters of the cause around the world, irrespective of faith and background, are all tired of seeing the carnage on their screens every single day. And I think the important point that you've alluded to, which I would advise all our viewers and listeners to take on board, is the time frame is not dependent. We can't pin a specific time frame to this, but the important part is we all need to act. We all need to act.
Yes, and I think without people taking action and thinking, and this is something that a lot of people think, is what can I do? It is, people are tired of seeing this, but the people who are living this are, yes, they're exhausted of this genocide, they're starved, they see their children dying, but you hear them, you hear the resilience in their voices, you hear them saying, it is all for Al-Aqsa, it is all for Palestine, it is, as long as you wake up, the world wakes up. 8 billion people around the world, 2 billion Muslims watching this genocide and being streamed to our screens, to our phones, and the impunity that this Zionist entity has gotten away with is something that we need to be able to put an end to. As you were discussing with your earlier speaker on what has to be done at various levels in terms of sports and culture and other things, this has to be at every front. Whatever you are good at, you need to be able to expose and exclude these Zionists from playing any role, any natural role that they have been playing around the world. And this action that each one of us, whether it is in the International Court of Justice, whether it is in politics, whether it's in sports, whether it is in media, whatever it is in, we have to, as they are pushing, we saw the Zionists and particularly Netanyahu and his government push the line every single day. They kept pushing the barrier, they kept pushing it. On the 10th day, they attacked the hospital, and because of the silence of the world and inability to take any action to stop them, they then went further to bomb every hospital in Gaza. They bombed the university, and we were unable to stop them. They bombed every university, every school. 835 mosques have been completely destroyed. Churches have been attacked. Nothing in Gaza is functioning, and yet you see the people coming from underneath the rubble, and with resilience that I've lived in Palestine and I lived through the first Intifada. I have never seen this amount of faith, of iman, of resilience, of sumud, of ribat, of really having no fear of death, coming out knowing that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has predestined the time we die. So not fearing death and standing in front of it. Speaking to my aunt just literally a few days ago, she was quoting to me examples of in the Quran of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have stopped the injustice to the people in the trench, in the Christians who were thrown in the fire. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to change the world through their sacrifice. And we saw this with the people of Gaza. Their sacrifice is not going to go in vain. That blood, that pure blood of the people of Gaza, their blessed blood, is not going to go in vain. Their resistance, their perseverance, their iman. She quoted to me the example of the woman in the palace of Pharaoh who believed in Allah and was punished. This could have been stopped. The sorcerers who were believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after Musa alayhi salam showed them the miracle, they would not give up and they resisted until the last moment, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for them a great place in Jannah. This is why we, the Iman of the people of Gaza, has shown us, their faith has shown us that this world is temporary, but this world is not the end. And this Iman and this resilience, knowing that there is a hereafter, gives us some comfort that whether we are paying a very heavy price for, on behalf of the Ummah, on behalf of humanity, to stop this evil from spreading around the world, the people of Gaza have paid a very heavy price. Yet they're willing to even go further. They're willing to pay any price it takes to stop this Zionist evil from the world. And this actually increases the responsibility of every single one of us. The responsibility that these people are. The flood of Al-Aqsa started on the 7th of October 2023, exactly 2 years ago, for Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And yet you saw today Zionists roaming inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, dancing, chanting, cursing the Muslims and the Arabs and the Ummah and the Prophet of this Ummah. You've heard it many times inside the Masjid Al-Aqsa, cursing the Prophet of Islam. Beyond that, performing their worship and their prostration inside the Masjid Al-Aqsa. Actually, the people of Gaza have stood their ground. The question is, have we as an Ummah stood our ground? Have we as a humanity been able to stand our ground? There is a lot we can do. There is a lot we need to do to stop this Zionist entity from spreading further. It is no more about Gaza. It is no more about Palestine. They're talking openly, and Netanyahu's bragging about it, together with Smotrich and Ben Gvir and his ministers, bragging about this promised land from the Nile to the Euphrates. They're not satisfied no longer. And I've repeated this many times. You know, you ask, where did they get this boldness from? Where did they get this courage to go this far? It is not from their Western backers who are providing them with ammunition to continue this genocide, which are complicit in this genocide. The United States, the United Kingdom, European countries, Germany, France, these weapons continue and the weapon parts continue to go through these countries to fuel this genocide. But it is not from these Western entities that Netanyahu brags about, that they represent Western civilization, and Herzog brag about. It is our inability to stop them as an ummah. 2 billion Muslims today around the world, living in Wahan, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam described it, unable to challenge this Zionist entity and to stand up against it. But we see glimpse of hope from these flotillas. And when I asked my aunt, and she said, we saw people have seen one of these ships from the shores of Gaza, and it gave them a lot of hope. It gives them hope to keep going and to keep fighting. And this is why more actions like this need to be taken to be able to give, one, the people in Gaza hope to keep fighting, and the people in Palestine, and two is to be able to stop and stand against this Zionist entity and let it know that the world no longer tolerates their arrogance, no longer tolerates their terror, no longer tolerates their genocide against the blessed people in Palestine.
Dr. Khalid, your advice is what I'm going to leave your segment on. There's quite a bit for our viewers to digest. There's quite a bit for our viewers to take in. There's a lot of practical advice given, and there's a reality check for each and every one of us. If we think that this is just going to stop in Gaza or this is just going to stop in Palestine, it's not. And we need to be aware of that because we all have a role to play wherever we are in the world. Dr. Khalid, we're really, really pleased for your time, and we are honored and grateful that you were able to join us and share some of the wisdoms with the audience. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you very much.
That was Dr. Khalid Al-Owaisi, who spoke to us, I think, while still being in a work environment. So the dedication to the cause is second to none, and it's where we draw our strength from. Being on the outside, this is where we draw our strength from our brothers and sisters in occupied Palestine, from those in the diaspora as well. And we lend our skills and our knowledge and our experiences to support the cause, to amplify the cause, to amplify the voices, and to ensure that we continue pushing back against this cancer of Zionism. Our next guest is a dear brother. Maulana Ibrahim Musa is a researcher and coordinator of the Palestine Information Network, which provides structured education and awareness on Palestine. He is the author of the book, Masjid al-Aqsa, A Journey Through Time. He has served for a long time in Muslim media and is currently the host of a weekly show on Radio Islam in Johannesburg, South Africa. Maulana Ibrahim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Khalid. Once again, always my pleasure.
Jazakallah khair for joining the stream and for the benefit of the audience, both locally and abroad. My first question to you would be around what do you measure or what do you take from the impact of the flotilla, the largest maritime expedition that was taken to break the siege on Gaza? We've obviously hearing news now about the various delegates being deported. We're expecting the South African delegation back tomorrow. The European delegates have been sent back to Europe, and the others hopefully are making their way home safely from wherever they are. And already we know that there's another flotilla on the water. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition has about 9 vessels on the water already, and they're already on the water and sailing towards Gaza. What's your thoughts on this and the impact of those souls on the flotilla and the impact on the people of Palestine and those around the world?
There was a word, Khalid, that we tend to become very comfortable with, and even on days like this, the 7th of October, which obviously marks Tufan al-Aqsa and marks 2 years since the Israelis didn't heed the lesson that Tufan al-Aqsa was trying to impress on them to stop subjugating and imprisoning a population, and then they began a genocide. And after all the imagery of the genocide that we've been exposed to over the past 2 years, one would get used to a sense of powerlessness. The idea that we've done so much, people seemingly all over the world are up in arms, and it seems as if there's nothing else we can do. And this is where the flotilla steps in. And saying that is not actually necessarily factually correct, because the flotillas have been a staple of trying to break the siege in Gaza for a number of, more than a decade. But in this particular context, a flotilla takes on, newfound proportions that where people thought borders are closed, where people thought nothing could get in, the flotilla shows there is a will, and where there is a will, there is a way. And we find through this particular flotilla it just shows the progression and how close Palestine is to breaking that siege. Again, when will it happen? How it will happen is again a matter for us to work harder towards, and where the assistance and the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come to bear. But compare all the previous flotillas, which were limited endeavors of just one or two boats, a handful of participants. Here we have close on 500 participants mirrored from over 50 countries, or some close to 50 countries of the world. And this shows the natural growth of this enterprise and cuts and nips this idea of powerlessness in the bud. As one of the flotilla participants or organizers had said, that when we believe in the idea of our powerlessness, it becomes ammunition in the guns, and it becomes ammunition in the narrative of the oppressor. And therefore, just like Tufan al-Aqsa physically broke down those walls and physically broke down the barrier of fear, similarly, these flotillas are breaking down the barriers. And it is a very bleak existence for the inhabitants of Gaza. And many a time they would be maybe a bit oblivious under the circumstances to the developments around the world. They would not have the time to micro analyze all the shifts that have occurred after October the 7th, and how these are very significant because they are facing a very bleak reality inside Gaza. But when these flotillas have embarked on this particular mission, and physically now you see boats that got within an earshot of Gaza. People in Gaza were able to see them. People on the boats were able to see Gaza. This shows that silver lining on the cloud. This shows the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think this is the spirit of initiative that the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions taught us. And the Nabi of Allah teaches us about the pledge of Hilf al-Fudul, the pledge that he took in the house of Abdullah ibn Jud'an even before formally becoming a prophet. And he said later on, this was much later on in his life, that I am willing to take that very same pledge, because it was a pledge to be able to look after the oppressed, a pledge to be able to come to the aid of those who are in difficulty. And therefore, I think this is the spirit of initiative that all of these participants have taken, a broad umbrella of people from different backgrounds who have come together with the same spirit of initiative and the same trailblazing spirit. And we've seen the weaknesses of the Israelis in being able to come through all of those boats at once. I saw an interesting report today that one of the participants saying that the Israeli soldiers could not even manage their mission of intercepting the boats. They were seasick and they were vomiting all over the boats that they had taken over. If it was so difficult for the amount of boats that have now gone forth, one can imagine when this number is going to expand, and it is only going to expand going further, how much more infinitely harder it is for the Israelis to be able to stop what is now an unstoppable wave.
Maulana, between activists, or between people who want to be active for the cause, there's a lot of discussion about, has there been changes to people's lifestyle? How has the 2-year genocide affected people on a personal level? Have there been changes to maybe a very consumer-based lifestyle that we might have had before? Some people, perhaps through the passage of time over the 2 years, some might have become desensitized. Others might have just slipped back into an old routine and an old life without much of a change, while with others there has been a change, and you can see this from interaction with people. Is there a disconnect in this activism and people's lifestyle and their day-to-day lives?
I would not generalize, and I'm sure nobody who actively is seeing the kind of content every day and then actively trying to mobilize to be able to stop this genocide would not be sincere about their commitment and would not try to wring the necessary changes in their life, because the micro affects the macro, and likewise the macro affects the micro. But I still do think that this is, from at least anecdotal evidence, a serious area to work on. And the diagnosis or the observation or the assessment that I would make is, you would see that after these 2 years, there's no doubt that people would have felt that we've spoken a lot, we know a lot, we've learned a lot, we've seen a lot, we've spent a lot for the cause, we've boycotted a lot. I mean, at least for people that this applies to, people who have marched a lot, people who've made dua a lot, lobbied, taken direct action. And still then there would be a feeling then that despite all of this, why is the stone not moving, so to speak, the stone that's blocking our way? And what we need to look at in that situation is, number one, the timing of Allah is something that we have to have trust. وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ فِي الصَّبْرِ عَلَى مَا تَكْرَهُ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. That having patience, bearing patiently on that which we dislike, there is great goodness. وَأَنَّ النَّصْرَ مَعَ الصَّبْرِ. There is victory with patience. وَأَنَّ الْفَرَجَ مَعَ الْكَرْبِ. And with all the difficulties, there will be an opening. But we also still then need to look, introspect deeply. If we are doing all of that and it's still not seeming to have the effect, taking all the material means, that perhaps we need to look at deeper factors. And I very often observe this, and again, it's subject to discussion, but a person could be very deeply engaged in perhaps some material online relating to Palestine, and quite effortlessly we could switch there over to some comedy or something immodest or some kind of sport highlight. A person could be full of energy for Palestine, and then things like our statuses simultaneously will say that we are going crazy over something that happened with Liverpool or something that happened with the Springboks. We could be, in an event, a very somber event, exposed to the realities of Gaza, eyewitness accounts from Gaza, the dismembered limbs, sometimes even the pictures, the skeletal bodies. And thereafter, in that same event, there would be seemingly a weighty focus on foodies and becoming food critics and all the gourmet food that has become such an obsession within the community. And my assessment of this is, it's a bit confounding then that while there is these two pictures, and nobody says do not live life, but there are certain actions that are just jarring when they are put next to each other. And therefore, I find it confounding that sometimes this does not occur, or the irony or the paradox of it does not occur. People do not think about it. We think, there's this release of positive energy. I am doing something for the cause, and there isn't the idea on the other side that, okay, I'm doing this for the cause, but shouldn't this also demand that I give up something for the cause? And in my feeling, this goes back to the demand of the hadith of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where narrated by Sayyidina Nu'man bin Bashir radiallahu anhu, al-mu'minuna kajasad al-wahid, كجسد واحد إن اشتكى عينه إذا اشتكى عينه إذا اشتكى كله or the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that the rest of the body would be in a state of restlessness and fever. Concentrate on the restlessness and fever. Fever and restlessness means that it cannot be business as normal. And after the flotilla was blocked, you had activists in Italy saying we need to disrupt, we need to ensure that life cannot be normal, we need to stop this country. And when we say disrupt and we echo that particular call, we then need to say that the very first things that need to be disrupted would be luxury, would be convenience, would be obsession with food, would be entertainment, things that are not healthy for us and our spiritual well-being generally overall. And in a situation like this, the demands of our faith actually require us to go so far. So I would feel that in heart-to-heart talk with myself, heart-to-heart introspection on this day of October the 7th, for the sake of improving ourselves and not for the sake of chastising myself or anybody else, is we cannot have it both ways when it comes to our solidarity. We cannot stand for Palestine, but then at the same time not want to dislodge ourselves from the trappings of a consumerist lifestyle. And this goes down to the concept of sidq. It goes down to authenticity. It goes down to credibility. If our activism is born from a place of sacrifice, then it will be more sincere. Not to say that if everything anybody has done, even with all those other trappings, is worthless. It certainly has an effect, and it will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. But if it comes from a deeper personal sense of sacrifice, then it possibly will be more sincere. And when something comes with more sacrifice, exertion from one side, and more sincerity from one side, then it most likely will have a greater effect in the eyes of Allah and a greater material effect on the ground. And perhaps that may be that last push required to be able to move the stone of this genocide, dislodge it forever, and dislodge the bane of Zionism.
Jazakallah khair. I think that's a lot for us to reflect on. Everybody has sincerity for the cause, and everybody is doing the best that they can. But as Maulana Ibrahim has mentioned, as our other guests have mentioned, we can always do a little bit more, and we can do it better. I think let's strive for that as a collective, and inshallah that effect, that desired effect and outcome, because of the quality of our output, the quality of our input will result in an output that is of more quality. Maulana Ibrahim, we really appreciate on behalf of the team you taking the time out to share some time with us and to share some advice and nasiha with the audience, both locally and abroad. And we look forward to having you and hosting you again, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum, barakallahu feek.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. If you've just joined us, this is our final stretch. We were in South Africa with our previous guest, Maulana Ibrahim Musa. From there, we'll be shooting over to the UK for our next guest, and our final guest will be coming in from the US. You don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to miss this. You want to make sure that you catch this final segment of Gaza Rising, this live stream commemorating 2 years of genocide and the spirit of...
We can feel it in the air. Freedom's coming, it is near. We won't give up for the rights. Standing strong for Palestine. Until we are coming home, we will stand next to the dome. Raise our hands up to the sky. Palestine will be free tonight.
Welcome back on our final stretch of the live stream. I'm very, very pleased to announce for the first time on the Social Intifada stream and on our channels, a dear brother, Umar Hussein is a host on the Narrative House podcast. He is also a khatib and a speaker. He has delivered numerous talks on Islamic and political issues for over 2 decades. And over the past 2 years, he has spoken regularly about Palestine at universities, at masajid, at community events, at protests, and at marches. Umar is originally Palestinian, and he is the son of a Nakba survivor. Brother Umar, very, very warm welcome to our live stream, and inshallah the first of many.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Khalid, Jazakallah khair.
Jazakumullah khair for joining us. Brother Umar, we speak about the Zionist regime as though it's in isolation and it's acting in isolation and it's doing everything at its own accord. And for those of us who extend the political lens a little further, we look at the United States, who's been arming, funding, providing political cover for this genocidal regime. We often ignore the, excuse me if I'm being crass here, but we ignore the filth in our own backyard. We ignore the complicity of the regimes in the region who are in fact supportive of the genocide. Can you offer some insight into this? How complicit are the regimes? What's the situation with the people on the ground versus the governments? And unfortunately, we have this habit of generalizing when we talk about a people, even if they're part of the Ummah, we generalize everybody's like this. Perhaps if you could just wade into a couple of those issues for us.
Yeah, it's a very, very important question. Now, I think, as you said, many people rightfully put the blame in terms of the US and other Western regimes in their support of the Zionist entity, but not enough attention is given to the Muslim regimes and in terms of their complicity. I think it's fair to say that they're completely complicit in this genocide. They're partners in the genocide. I would go as far as saying that. And I can give you many examples of that. So just a few examples. If we look at Egypt and the Sisi regime, they've been complicit in several ways. They've sent weapon shipments. For example, the MV Catherine that docked at Alexandria was then sent a shipment of weapons to Haifa. We have the SAR 5, which is an Israeli warship that was escorted through the Suez Canal by an Egyptian Navy vessel. So these are explicit examples. We have also the UAE, which has openly allied itself with the Zionist entity. And that goes across all the Muslim world, unfortunately. Even if we look at the latest peace deal that Trump is offering, which is really a surrender deal that he's forcing upon the people of Gaza. And by the way, the people of Gaza can accept anything they want at this stage. They're in a position where they've been totally abandoned, and there is nothing expected of them to continue resisting when the whole Ummah has abandoned them in terms of all those powerful nations in the region. So I think it's clear to say none of the Muslim regimes, I mean, yes, we have Yemen who's stood by Palestine and Gaza, but they're not in any position to really challenge this occupation. They've gone through their own brutal civil war for many years, and they're not in a position to actually uproot this occupation. So what we found is through trade, diplomatic relations, through working with Western nations such as America, they are really very much partners in this genocide. And I think if we don't call them out, we would be missing, I think, a key vital point in this whole discussion. And Brother Dr. Takriti was saying that, it's very clear that we need liberation for Palestine, and liberation won't happen until we liberate ourselves in this region. There was a really good example of a demonstration that happened in Jordan not long ago, where people on the streets were shouting, "Oh, people of Gaza, forgive us because we are also under siege." And I think this is a sentiment that we've seen in Egypt, in Jordan, in Bahrain. We've seen it in many, many countries, even in Turkey, where people were protesting against the ships that were leaving the Turkish ports en route to Haifa. They were arrested. So Turkish protesters have actually called out Erdogan, and some even went as far as saying he's a Zionist. And that's the problem we have. We are selective in who we're saying is normalizing, because people like the UAE regime, they're very explicit in terms of their normalization. But we have these dealings that are happening behind the scenes in terms of the trade, in terms of diplomatic relations, in terms of coming up for a rescue plan for the Zionist entity through Trump's deal. This is all very much part of this genocide on the people of Gaza.
So there's a reality that we face, I think, and that we've come to terms with, is that the current regimes are not going to mobilize armies. despite them sitting at the head of armies that are worth billions and some of the most high-tech equipment in the world. So the discussion is around how does the status quo change? What do people do on the ground? Do people continue allowing this to happen? Do people rise up against their various regimes? Is there a need for revolution within the Muslim world? Or is there some political leverage that can be taken by these various states, which is non-military, in order to be able to choke the Zionists? Which of those scenarios do you think are feasible, are likely to happen based on your analysis?
So it's very clear there are many measures that they could have taken, but they haven't even investigated those options, whether it's trade, diplomatic relations. So we know that many of these countries are still trading. In fact, many of them increased their trade with the Zionist entity over the last 2 years. So you're right to say that it wasn't just military intervention, it's even the other soft power options that haven't been utilized. So this is the first thing to say. The regimes have no interest in actually choking the Zionist entity. In fact, I think a very good point that was made is the Palestinian people and the people of Gaza are seen as a thorn in the side of these regimes, because it's given hope to the Ummah that we can actually break free from occupation. Because occupation does not only come in the form of Israeli occupation that we see in Gaza and in Palestine in general, it's also in the fact that our people cannot even speak openly without being arrested and tortured. So many people are in the prisons of King Abdullah in Jordan and of Sisi in Egypt. And in, as I mentioned, even Erdogan in Turkey. People are being arrested for simply speaking up for Palestine, for trying to take concrete action for Palestine. So the regimes themselves, I think we have to make it very clear, there is no good in them. There is absolutely no good in them. But the Ummah itself has lots of good, and there's many examples of that. I just want to give you a couple of examples. So in Jordan, we had 2 operations that were carried out at the Karama crossing between Jordan and occupation. These were carried out by 2 former Jordanian soldiers. And I would like to add something here. They were Jordanian, not Palestinian Jordanian. And the reason I mention that is because many people try to claim that it's a Palestinian cause. These are Jordanians from the tribes, and they took action and they moved and they were martyred after undertaking their operations against the Zionist occupation. We had the same scenario take place in Rafah by 2 Egyptian soldiers. And do you remember that night when they bombed Rafah? They bombed the tents, and then on social media there was that huge campaign of all eyes on Rafah. But actually 2 Egyptian soldiers that very next day took action against the occupation and were martyred. And it just shows you that the strong feeling that exists within the Muslim world, within the militaries. And I think this is an important point here. It's not that our militaries are detached from Gaza as a cause. It's very much their cause. There was a very interesting article written by the Middle East Eye after that operation in Rafah by the 2 soldiers. And it interviewed many Egyptian soldiers. And one person said something quite profound. He said that Sisi and his regime will not allow us to save our people. And I think this is crucial. I may be originally from Palestine in the sense that my dad was born there and from this land, but this is wholeheartedly an Islamic issue. This is an issue actually that goes even beyond that. Even we can see in humanity how people have responded in the flotilla, people that went to the Global March for Gaza, which I was part of, and we were stopped in Egypt. So the reality is this has transcended beyond Gaza. This is an issue about what the world really under a really nasty, brutal occupation of capitalism that we can see its murderous, output in Gaza, but also the fact that we are being arrested and prevented from speaking out even in the West. We see the protests in Berlin, we see the protests in the Muslim world being crushed and being demonized. So I think we really need to raise our call and say, as an ummah, do we want to continue living under this occupation where we are separated into many different countries? As the Sheikh said just before I came on, that we are one body, but we've been split up into these small states that are weak and ineffective. When really, if you look at our previous honor as an ummah, is when we were united. And we were united and we defended the rights of all people, including Ahl Dhimma, the non-Muslims. A really lovely example was that the Patriarch of Jerusalem, he's the Christian Patriarch of Jerusalem, when he visited Erdogan last month, he gave him a replica of the Omari Treaty. This is the covenant of the second Khalif of the Muslims, Umar al-Khattab, which is a guarantee to protect the Christians, their churches, their crosses, their practices, essentially. And subhanAllah, he gave that to Erdogan. And really, it was a very symbolic message. What he was saying to him is, you have a right, you have a responsibility to protect us like your forefathers once did. And subhanAllah, why are our scholars not putting that kind of pressure on our rulers who have completely failed this ummah? Why are they not putting that pressure on the military, on the journalists, on the social media influencers to make this a global call? Because unfortunately, while we did deal with the narrative of it didn't start on the 7th of October, as a global mass, as the global masses, we did very well. We were able to deal with the media juggernaut across the world, and we were able to recapture the narrative. But why have we not moved forward from that to say, actually, as an ummah, what is our future? What about the people of Al-Fashir in Sudan? What about the Rohingya Muslims who are being slaughtered by the Burmese government and the Arakan army? What about the Muslims of East Turkestan in the dungeons of the Chinese? I think as an ummah, we need to expand our thinking a little bit here and say we need to recapture what the world needs now, which is a system built on justice and really that will return the rights of all people according to Islam.
Umar, the last question I have for you before you leave is, it might be a little deeper, but if you could share a spotlight on this, how does the Ummah, how do the Muslims who number 2 billion and are quite subjugated right now, how does the Ummah break free from these shackles that are partly self-imposed and partly imposed from the outside? What needs to be done? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that we need to look at. One, we need to first of all look at our thinking. We need to free our minds from this occupation. When I see people talking about, I'm Egyptian, I'm Palestinian, I'm Indian, I'm Pakistani, and they believe it to mean that that's their identity, it's a form of separation. We need to do away with those ideas of nationalism. We need to do away with the ideas that the current world order, the UN, the ICJ, the ICC, what they call human rights, women's rights, children's rights, is something that we should aspire to. We have a great model in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Khulafa al-Rashidin that came after him, and centuries of Islamic rule. Look at the example of Umar al-Khattab, who radhiyallahu anhu protected the Christian churches when he liberated Palestine, compared to how the churches are being desecrated in Gaza today. So let's have confidence in our deen, number one. Number two, we need to be vocal. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if you see a munkar, change it with your hand. If you cannot, then speak against it. فَبِلِسَانِ. So with his tongue. So speak. We have the ability to do amr bil ma'ruf, nahy anil munkar, do commanding of good and forbidding evil. That's a duty upon Muslims. Unfortunately, sometimes we've restricted ourselves to boycotting, charity, dua. But actually, the fundamental aspect is you're denying what is wrong. And just to give you maybe an analogy of that, we have a patient who comes to a hospital and he's bleeding out. Your first response isn't to give him painkillers, right? Your first response is there's a major incident here. He's bleeding out. I need to think as a doctor, as a surgeon, how do I stop the critical issue? A lot of the time we look to the peripheral issues like the pain and like let's give him relief and solidarity, and we're not looking at the problem, which is an ummah. We're split apart and therefore we're being easily picked off. So we need to be very confident in the way we address these issues. We need to use social media effectively, as like you brothers and this, mashallah, the organization Social Intifada, how you're using this platform to carry this message globally. And many of us now have used social media effectively in the last 2 years in particular. How do we leverage that? How do we use it, especially if we speak other languages? Can we interact with the military online? I'll just give you an example. There was a post I did about calling on military intervention, and I picked on Erdogan failing the people of Gaza. And I got a lot of people attacking me initially from a nationalistic perspective. And then, subhanAllah, a former Turkish soldier commented on my post and he said, I respect Brother Omar because I've seen him talk about all the Arab rulers and he has a complete right to also talk about Erdogan. So let's get rid of this idea, my ruler, my country. We are an ummah. So I think we need to be aware of our deen. We need to get rid of these ideas of nationalism and a lack of confidence in Islam as a system. And we need to be active, whether on social media, at protests, at talks, amongst our families. We are all capable. We all have a sphere of influence. Imagine if we use that sphere of influence, all of us, effectively. SubhanAllah, this message could become dominant, where people see these rulers as something that are an obstacle to us and actually start calling upon those with influence, the armies, the journalists, the thinkers, the scholars, to say, look, we need you to rise for us as an ummah now. We need you to speak up. That word, that's a speech that you have, like Sister Lena said right at the beginning, it's a very effective tool. Before Salahuddin Ayyubi liberated Palestine, the first people that rose were the poets, because they reminded the people that they should not live in comfort while Al-Aqsa and Palestine is under occupation. So my message today is, let's remember that we speak for the sake of this deen and for the sake of this ummah. So let's make those words carry far and wide.
Viewers, you please do follow our guests. All of them follow Omar on the Narrative House podcast. Follow him on his socials, because there's a lot more information, there's a lot more awareness, there's a lot more understanding that you can glean from our various speakers that we've had. Omar has a speciality, and that's something that you guys all need to tap into. Brother Omar, we are extremely grateful for your time this evening. And inshallah, we pray that we have many more conversations in the future that can be of benefit to one and all. Jazakumullah khair.
Allah reward you all for your efforts. Jazakallah khair.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. If you've been on social media for the last 2 years, and you've been looking at content and trying to understand what's been happening in Palestine, chances are that you have come across content from one of the most distinct content creators that we have for the cause, that has been fighting the good fight on social media. And I'm very, very pleased to announce our next guest. Our final stop is in the United States, and I'm very pleased to welcome Lucius Riker to the platform and to the conversation and to the communication. For those of you who don't know, the videos are quite distinct. You have definitely seen the content online. Lucius is a freelance journalist with a focus on social justice issues. I'm going to jump straight into it. Welcome. Your content is very distinct, inspirational, but emotional as well, because you have a knack of connecting the viewer to the sentiment and the emotion and the feeling of the reporter, which is something not a lot of content creators do. And there's often a disconnect between what we're seeing, because we scroll through the images, we scroll through the dismembered limbs, we scroll through the bombing of our kids, and then we just change off and we move to some other content. How do you put this together, and what's your aim and your intention in merging these two together when you're doing your content?
Well, thank you for having me, Khalid. When it comes to the videos that I create, the intention is to break through a lot of the cognitive dissonance that we have been seeing in people as they're trying to absorb this information, as they're trying to go through and, view the videos, bear witness. There's a lot of disconnect between Arab speakers and non-Arab speakers. When they're watching these videos, you'll see the Arab speakers, they can understand the intent, they can understand the sentiment, everything that's going on inside of the video. They can hear the fear in the journalist's voice and hear the situation as it's being described. But for a non-Arab speaker, you're not going to hear what's being said. You're not going to understand quite the reality on the ground. You won't be hearing what the mothers are screaming into the air as they're holding their children. And those small little pieces of it are so integral to understanding the reality of what's happening, because we are already so limited in how we're experiencing this. You could see a school burning in the palm of your hand, but it is just that for you. You're not feeling the heat of the flames on your skin. You're not hearing the screams all around you. It is not as real to you as it is. And that is one of the things that we're trying desperately to break through. You're not going to be able to smell the munitions in the air that smell like gunpowder. You're not going to be able to smell the burning flesh or feel the concrete dust clinging to the already parched mucous membranes in your throat and lungs. But being able to understand what's going on, being able to immerse yourself in what's happening is an integral part of taking it from derealization to understanding that this is happening right now. This is happening to people just like you and I. And though we're separated by borders, though we're separated by language, these things shouldn't separate us as human beings. So one of the main issues that I'm seeing us experience here, one of the main issues that I'm seeing us experience here is breaking through that human psychology. Trying to get people to understand what happens beyond these videos. When the journalists wake up in the middle of the night, shocked awake, not knowing if it was a bomb or a dream, or when the auditory hallucinations start as they try and fall asleep from sleep deprivation and adrenaline, they are not able to know, are these cries real or are they in my head? Because they sound so real. If we can get people to move beyond this world happening in the palm of their hands and move it to something that is happening truly all around them, if we can get people to step onto the shores of Mawasi and hear the drones above their head, to move through their phone, through the screen, and see that this is happening, that this is real, then that is when the world will move. That is when people will finally get up and start doing something.
What would you say is the psychological reason behind us, all of us, wherever we may be in the world? We get horrified at the video we watch for a few seconds, and then we can switch easily over to something else and try and bury that. And when Yumna Al-Said was in South Africa, she mentioned something very profound, which has stuck with me ever since, is when you switch off your phone or when you end that video, it stops for you because you stop watching that video. But the pain, as you're mentioning, the pain and the reality of that child, of that mother, of that elderly person is not going away. They're still continuing with their pain. They're still continuing with bleeding out in a hospital, or trying to save a limb, or looking for some morsel of food to be able to fill their bellies. Where's this disconnect? Where does it come from within us? And how do we kind of work away from that?
I'm really glad you mentioned that. That is a part of psychology that is based on compartmentalization. It's actually the reason why Hollywood has become so prevalent as, this theory that all of this is CGI, catch-up, or AI. It's because if you were to accept that this was really real and it was still happening even after you closed your phone, if you were to accept that this situation is as real to you as the fabric on your skin, then you would have to accept that you've just bared witness to one of the most horrifying things that a person could ever see. So people compartmentalize, people push it down, people decide either, it's only happening because it's CGI, it's AI, or they decide that it's only happening in the palm of their hand, in their phone. And it's with that compartmentalization that people protect themselves, people protect their minds from the horrors that are ongoing every single day. And I'm hoping to God that people decide to accept that this is a reality that is continuing to happen even once they close their phone. I'm hoping to God we can convince people that these things are happening even if they want to believe that they are fake. Because once we do that, once we get people to understand that it is happening, that these are happening and continuing to happen, I think that's the time where they'll finally imagine themselves in the same situation. Well, they'll finally start moving and doing something and caring about what is going on. But it comes at a cost. There is a steep emotional cost to bearing witness to these scenes, to understanding that it is happening now. It is happening still. As we're talking right now, there are children in the hospital. There's martyrs in the hospital. We were working on evacuating a 10-month-old boy. His name was Sammy Dagmesh, and he was 10 months old, covered in 40% burns all over his body, with a broken humerus and a broken femur on his right arm and his left leg. And he was supposed to be evacuated in mid-October. And we got word the other night that he passed. And he didn't make it. So now he's waiting for burial, according to our team. And there are thousands of other children just like him. And these things are continuing, even if you're not seeing the videos right now. Just imagine yourself in the hospital, knowing that they are still there, even though you have closed your phone, knowing that they are still in pain because there isn't enough pain medication to go around, and they are relying almost exclusively on ketamine at this point. That even when you put away your screen, even when you close out Instagram, they are still there, and they are still in pain, and they are still hurting. And I know the emotional cost that comes with acknowledging that it is still happening and you can't put it away, but it's worth it if we can do something to change it.
So it would be an active decision, an active thought process inside each and every one of us to understand that what we're seeing there is something that's real. It's not just something that's taking place far away, but it's something that's real. It's something that we need to invest in more emotion into what we're seeing in order for that to hit, for the reality to hit us. Am I correct in terms of that line of thinking?
Yes, because it is a choice. It is a choice to bring Gaza home. It's a choice to continue to think about it. It's a choice to expand your thoughts beyond what you're seeing, to contextually empathize with the situation. It's a choice to imagine what happens next, just based off of, the most obvious data. You see a child in the hospital, that child is in pain. That child isn't going to disappear when you close your phone. You have to choose to imagine that child is still there and still in pain. You have to choose to imagine that the bombs are still falling. And even if you don't have the information right this second, you will soon. You will soon have the information that gives you the bigger picture of what is happening inside of Gaza, and not just Gaza, but Palestine as a whole. These things are still occurring in the West Bank. We're seeing attacks on Kher, where they decided this morning that it was a closed military zone because settlers broke in dressed as the occupation and decided they were going to mow down 150 olive trees. If you bring yourself to that choice where you are willing to acknowledge and think about it, even beyond the videos, I think that will motivate you to get out and do something, even if it's something small. And that thing, it doesn't have to be protesting. You could put up QR codes for the journalists on the ground, the ones that are risking their lives every single day to bring you this information. You could put up infographics about what is happening. It doesn't have to be the graphic images. It could just be the events as they are occurring. You can put them on your electric poles in your neighborhood. You can post them wherever you would post a yard sale sign, and you can help educate the people around you, because as so many people have said today, it is about getting to your family, talking to your family, changing their minds, and then your neighbors, and then your neighborhood, and then your coworkers, your friends. We are expanding outward by educating each other. Immediately before I came on the live, I was speaking to a friend of mine who told me that she didn't know what was happening in Gaza until she started watching some of the content that I made. That's how we do it. Whether you make content or not, that is how we start changing the world in favor of free Palestine. And for my cousins, especially the ones that are watching in the chat, it means everything to have you by their side as they are struggling inside of Gaza.
it means so much to. I watched the video of the sighting of the flotilla that almost made it to shore, and I heard the emotion in the voice of the crowd of people who'd gathered and the kids, and that in itself did so much for them. It galvanized to say, people are still here for us. They're doing their absolute best. They knew it was going to get intercepted. They knew they were going to get kidnapped. But through these little actions, I think, Lucius, we don't often realize the impact that our actions could have. We might deem them as insignificant. And what you're talking about and what you're referring to is doing the work within our own circles. Because once those circles start expanding, we don't know how far they're going to reach. It's like that pebble that you throw into the water. And we need to be those pebbles that can start causing those ripples, which would turn into waves. But perhaps we don't want to put in that work. I don't know. We need to reflect internally here. We don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations with people around us. But then again, perhaps we need to be asking ourselves, if 2 years down the line in a genocide, we're not willing to address relationships which are pro-genocide, then we need to wonder, are those relationships worth holding on to?
Exactly. And a lot of people will lose people in their lives, but you would have lost them anyway. At some point in the future, they would have cut you off because they will have decided that they were always for a free Palestine. They will retroactively decide that they were never the bad guy. And you knowing the truth about them is going to lead to them cutting you out. So it is a choice whether you want to stand by your morals and convictions now or just be cut out anyway later. And with the flotilla, every share, every like, every interaction on those videos got the flotilla's voices to Gaza. And you saw the people cheering on the beaches when they saw the McKenna finally get close to Gaza's shores. What you didn't see was all of the cheering in our group chats. What you didn't see was all of the journalists sending videos and messages to all of us who are working outside of Gaza, trying to help get the information out, as they are so happy and cheering. They're cheering for the flotilla as it is so close to arriving. You won't see most of the videos where they're telling you how much it made them have hope, even though they didn't make it. How it wasn't performative, how it wasn't nothing. You won't see them talking about the fishing. I know that video that went around wasn't from when they actually did fish. They didn't end up getting a video of them fishing, which is probably safer. But they shared it because they wanted you to know that it did happen. Hani Amra wanted you to know that these things did happen thanks to the flotilla. And every amount of effort that everybody watching put into sharing that information managed to give Gaza hope. So you guys are already changing the world through your engagement, through your dissemination of information, through all of these platforms. You're managing to get the voices out and change the world.
And I think that's something that will resonate with all of our viewers and all of our listeners here, in bringing the emotion, in making an active choice to tie the emotion into the content that you're watching. And I think that's a critical takeaway for anybody who's been watching, especially this segment of the live stream tonight. And hopefully we can change that process within ourselves and then start taking it forward to others. I recall we had a protest outside the US Embassy in support of the Freedom Flotilla on Friday. And as everybody had left, because there was another protest they needed to go to, there was this lovely old lady who I stopped to do a little interview with. She's in her 70s. She says, I'm in the last leg of my life. I'm Jewish. And I used to think this way until the reality of what's happened. And I refuse to have this being done in my name anymore. And I face a problem within my home because my husband sees it exactly the opposite. So there are people willing to stand up for these principles and morals across the spectrum and do these difficult things in their lives. We all should be doing that.
Absolutely.
Wherever we are. I really, really, really want to thank you, and I wish we had more time, but I hope we'll be able to speak again at another juncture. And on behalf of all of us in South Africa and everybody who's watching the stream around the world, your work it serves as a beacon for anybody who looks for content. And rest assured, viewers and listeners, content that comes out of Lucius is verified. It's from journalists. It's first-hand accounts. And one of the amazing things, that's just a personal note from me to you, is you've managed to teach a lot of content creators how to beat the algorithms with the 15-second delay. So that's something we've been teaching others as well in our conversations with aspiring content creators and trying to encourage them in terms of how to beat those pesky algorithms.
If I could
any information on that, any tips on that before we let you go?
Yes, if you're going to post graphic content, setting your audience to 18 plus is one of the ways that you can make sure that you don't get your video taken down. The reason why videos tend to get taken down is to protect younger audiences. It's not about censoring the information. It's just about making sure that teenagers don't come across videos of dead children. And it's very important, and I support specifically that side of things. There is a lot of censorship on the applications, and there aren't a lot of really good reasons for removing videos. But if you want to get around that specific thing, just set your audience to 18 plus, and that will help protect you. 15-second delay allows people to share videos to their stories if they don't have an 18 plus audience without showing anything graphic, so they don't get in trouble. That's the whole point of the 15-second delay, is just to protect the people who share. And reposts won't hurt anybody. Do not post graphic content on TikTok. It doesn't go over well.
Yeah. We had a news post removed, which was actually a reshare from Al Jazeera, which was removed because it had a protest which had some fire in the background. So, those tips from yourself are absolute gold. Guys in the audience, guys in the chat, anybody watching, please pick up on these tips. And if you're not following Lucius, then I don't know. But you should be, because you've come across the content. You make sure you follow, make sure you share, make sure you engage the content. That's really, really, really crucial. On behalf of the team here at Social Intifada and the audience in South Africa, it's been an absolute pleasure. We hope to speak to you again soon, God willing, inshallah. And please keep up the excellent, excellent work. Much gratitude.
Thank you so much. I'm honored, Khalid. I hope to see you again soon.
Definitely will do, inshallah. Awesome. That was one of the leading content creators for Palestine, and not just content for the sake of content, but content that's actually verified and content that is up to date and up to the minute, because content is sourced from leading journalists. The content is translated from Arabic. A context is given. Often feelings are referred to. What did you hear? Can you hear the emotion in the voice of the reporter who's reporting on this? There's a circle of journalists, and content is passed on from there. The least we can do, brothers and sisters, is to ensure that the content that is being shared with us, the content that's being put out, people are putting their lives on the line, literally putting their lives on the line. Do not dismiss it as just another piece of content. Do not dismiss it as just another video from Gaza or another video of the killings, or it's too much to stomach, or it's too much to see, because then we've disconnected completely. And the more we become disconnected, the more we've played into the hands of the Zionist propaganda machine, because they want us to be desensitized. That's the key word here. They want us to be desensitized from what is taking place, because then we will just continue with our lives and our material goals, and this genocide will continue unabated. On behalf of Social Intifada, please do follow us on our channels. Ensure you follow all of the excellent speakers we've had today. A big shout out and a thank you to each one and every one of them. Sincere gratitude to all of them for making the time out. It's been 2 years. Gaza is rising. Gaza will continue to rise. We all have to play a part in that on the outside, and let's continue doing what we're doing, as Shireen alluded to, and do a little more. And that comment that's come up from Lucius, follow the journalists. Even if you don't understand Arabic, you can see the visuals on your screen. Make sure you follow those journalists. It's been a pleasure. Please keep up the good work wherever you are, and continue engaging. And together, each and every one of us have a part to play wherever we are in the world. We have a part to play in this to end this abhorrent, absolutely disgusting, demonic ideology that is currently dropping bombs on Gaza, but is going to come for you wherever you are as well. It's not going to stop in Palestine.
خافيت من أي صوت رصاص وقصف ولا رصاص ولا قصف ولا انفجار عاد. هو أنا بخاف شوي بس ما بخافش بالجيش ولا بخاف ولا من حدا غير الله حامينا. استشهد على أرضي، دموت على أرضي. بروح هناك يعني بموت هناك. يعني إذا هربت من أرضي بديش أموت هناك، لا عادي بموت هنا أرجع. شهداء عند رب العالمين. يطلعونا من أرضنا، مش رح نطلع. شو ما يصير مش رح نطلع. هاي أرضنا وأرض جدودنا. مش رح نطلع. صامدين. وتقدست أسماؤه وتعالى، وأكون للوطن الحبيب مشيدا أنمى إليه. خافيت من أي صوت رصاص وقصف ولا رصاص ولا قصف ولا انفجار عاد. هو أنا بخاف شوي بس ما بخافش بالجيش ولا بخاف ولا من حدا غير الله حامينا. استشهد على أرضي، دموت على أرضي. بروح هناك يعني بموت هناك. يعني إذا هربت من أرضي بديش أموت هناك، لا عادي بموت هنا أرجع. شهداء عند رب العالمين. يطلعونا من أرضنا، مش رح نطلع. شو ما يصير مش رح نطلع. هاي أرضنا وأرض جدودنا. مش رح نطلع. صامدين. وتقدست أسماؤه وتعالى، وأكون للوطن الحبيب مشيدا أنمى إليه.